Welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today, I'll be chatting with novelist Heather Frese, whose debut novel, The Baddest Girl on the Planet, won the Lee Smith Novel Prize. Her second novel, The Saddest Girl on the Beach, is out now from Blair. Her work has been published widely, earning notable mention in the Pushcart Prize anthology, as well as Best American Essays. She received a master's degree from Ohio University and an MFA from West Virginia University. She currently writes, edits, and teaches in Raleigh, North Carolina, but coastal North Carolina is her longtime love and source of inspiration, with her writing being deeply influenced by the wild magic and history of the Outer Banks. So sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
Hi, my name is Heather Frese, and I am here to read from my new book, The Saddest Girl on the Beach. I'm going to read from the beginning, so there really isn't much that you need to know, except that this is set on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which I guess you will find out as I start reading. So I'm just going to start reading. Chapter 1. My hand was bleeding when I touched Nate for the first time since I'd arrived at the inn, when he glided his kayak across the Pamlico Sound and pushed up beside me on the dock. I'd reached out to grab the paddle as Nate pulled the kayak in, scraping myself on the rough post of the dock as I stretched out over the water. Tiny red rivulets ran down my wrists and dripped on the pier, the bright crimson out of place on this dimly bruised January day. A sharp wind kicked up whitecaps, ruffling the muted reeds until they bent their heads low. Nate grabbed my right hand, cold beads of water dripping off his arm and landing on my own. He brushed at the red, saw that it came from a thin scratch. Stigmata? He asked lightly, wiping the blood away. The old me, the one standing in front of the dividing line of my father's death, would have laughed and made devil horns. This new me only vaguely recognized that Nate's question was intended to be lighthearted. The water lapped against the dock, and I closed my eyes. Charlotte? Nate asked, his voice soft. Are you okay? He pulled my hand closer to his chest. The scratch started to throb, and it felt like something I could anchor myself to. I opened my eyes and turned away. Back at the inn, a light flicked on, illuminating a second-story window. I nodded. Fine, I said, through the tightness in my throat. I pulled back from him and ran my other hand across the rough post, pressing down to see if I could bleed again, to see if I could feel something. I stopped when I saw Nate watching me. How was kayaking? I asked. Nate shrugged. Chilly, but I needed some water time after being stuck on the mainland. I'd been here for 3 days, but Nate had been visiting friends in Raleigh the whole time. The breeze kicked up, damp and fish-smelling. I knew I should ask about his trip, force a smile, and then listen with interest, but the prospect exhausted me. I'm gonna go back and help with dinner, I said. The wind lashed my cheeks as I walked down the boardwalk, heading toward the light. The Pamlico Inn was the only thing keeping me steady, the inn and the water. I was otherwise loose, untethered, and distant from my brother James and my mother. I couldn't stand to be with them now that our family was only 3. At home, I'd been constantly aware of the friction caused by my father's absence, the space where he should have been. My father, stable and strong and reassuring, a beacon. He'd been gone for 6 months now. Gone. 9 years ago, when I was 10 years old, the National Park Service moved the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. I thought it would crumble and fall, afraid its solid striped body, the steady golden sweep of its beam across the night, would be lost. The Park Service was moving the lighthouse away from the pounding waves and eroding ocean. But I imagined the black and white spirals, all 208 feet of them, swaying, rocking, left, right, catching momentum, crashing to the sand. Piles of black and white bricks. Everywhere dust, rising and billowing and choking me with grit. Days later, I would still be spitting out rogue grains when I brushed my teeth. But the lighthouse didn't fall. It just moved, the glimpse of black and white spirals no longer visible from Lighthouse View Road. The rotating beam now illuminating maritime forest instead of dunes and beach and frothy waves. Still, What once was can haunt a person, can make them run away from home. And this is where I ran. Where I landed, this great gray seashell of an inn tumbled onto the shore. I was still running. I ran away from Nate, up the boardwalk and toward the inn, the cuts on my palms stinging against the salty breeze. The inn had 3 stories with ramps along the outside connecting the new addition to the original, with lace curtains fringing the windows of rooms named after North Carolina wildflowers. My best friend Evie Austin's parents owned it. The inn closed every year for the month of January, so the Austins let me choose whichever room I wanted. I picked a small yellow room overlooking the Sound, the Primrose Room, in the old part of the inn. I liked it because of its coziness, and I liked being close to the family quarters. Mr. and Mrs. Austen had a bedroom tucked behind the office in the original part of the inn, along with a living space, and Evie and Nate had rooms overlooking the garden, since tourists wanted a water view. Once I was inside the inn, I went upstairs, hid in the Primrose Room, and let myself cry about my dad. I felt so stupid getting upset in front of other people, hated the way the grief still rose in my throat unexpectedly. It had been 6 months now. 6 months and 18 days. Someone knocked on my door, and I wiped my face with my bleeding hands. Charlotte, Evie said, coming in. Don't, I said. You better have pants on, she said, pushing the door open. Evie stood with a hand on her hip, her eyes shadowed. Then she rushed forward, touched my face, and pulled back. Her fingers damp, red. Why is your face all bloody? Evie asked. She pulled a tissue from the side table and rubbed at my cheeks. I showed her my hand. There's something sharp on the dock post, I said. Evie took the band-aids and put them on my palm. I swallowed hard, swallowed again, stared at Evie as her dark hair fell forward, shiny and straight and long. She threw away the band-aid wrappers, and I sat down on my bed. When are you going to unpack? Evie asked, pulling a pair of pink socks out of my bag and tossing them at me. You're home. I shrugged, let the socks fall. I didn't bother telling her that nothing was permanent, not even home, especially not home. That I'd watched my father die, packed my bags, and left for my first semester of college because he'd wanted me to go, because everyone said it would take my mind off it. Him. September, October, November, I did everything but think of it. Think of him. I unpacked my luggage and hung posters on the walls of my dorm room. And then, in December, Evie called to tell me she was pregnant, mingled notes of apology and terror in her voice. 2 weeks before finals, I took a leave of absence from school. The form I filled out asked the reason for my departure. Life and death, I wrote. Melodramatic, yes, but that's how I was feeling at the time. And I left the solid Midwest and came down here to the Outer Banks, to this improbable strip of islands, this narrow, shifting place, more water than land, to be with my friend, to stare at the water and make everything go away. Evie sat down on the edge of the bed beside me, tossing the pink socks up and down in one hand. Did I ever tell you about the time my parents tried to make me wear a pink dress? She asked. I shook my head no and tried to smile, but really, I just wanted to be alone. Please leave. Evie went on. It was some awful Easter dress or something, she said. I think I was 7. I was in my Sherpa phase. No way was that dress going on my body. Your Sherpa phase? I blew my nose. Please leave. Please leave. Please leave. I was obsessed with climbing Mount Everest, Evie said. You know, like a Sherpa. She got up and placed the socks in a dresser drawer. I still think Sherpas are kind of sexy, she said. What's not to love? I asked. A phone rang downstairs in the office. I'll get it, Evie said. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the frame. I'll see you at dinner. I went to the bathroom and washed my face, soaking my band-aids, then wandered over to the Coates room to look out the window, relieved to be alone. Pampas grass shook and swayed in the wind around the curved gravel driveway. Winters on Cape Hatteras were more desolate and more compelling than I'd imagined. There was a quietness, a muted rhythm that made summer seem like a carnival of color and life. Ice cream stands, putt-putt courses, bright t-shirts flying from shop windows. All these furled in on themselves in winter. The island, elegant and extended like a ballerina's arm, jutted people away in these windy, chilly months. I loved it both ways, winter and summer. My parents had only seen the summer months, had planned to see winter when they retired. My dad would never see a Hatteras winter. Before the grief behind my eyes could transition from a prickle to a tidal rush, I got up and walked downstairs, hoping the motion would distract me. I picked at my left palm. Outside a tall sliding glass door, an egret swooped down, landing in the marsh grass. The sun peeked above the rim of a streaky gray cloud, reflecting on the stillness of the shallow bowl of water that was the Pamlico Sound. I stepped outside, the breeze fresh on my face, and breathed. Then I got out my phone and sent my mom a text message about the egret. I hadn't been able to talk to her since I'd left, too tired and grief-worn to withstand her asking me to come home. I put my phone back in my pocket and walked downstairs to the kitchen, running my fingers over the carved sign that said galley, breathing in the onion and potato smell of clam chowder preparations. Inside, Evie and Nate bickered back and forth, and then Evie said something about dying, and I didn't want to hear them talk about my dad, so I went in. Nate blushed and bent down to the sink, tall and lanky with his wetsuit peeled half off. Before I could say anything, Evie grabbed a handful of silverware in one hand and me by the other and spun me out the kitchen door. We went to the inn's dining room, which the family used as their own space in the off season, and started setting out plates and cups and napkins for dinner. He's okay with it, Evie said. Her fingers flitted down forks, hummingbird quick. What? Steven, she said. He's okay with the baby. I didn't know you told him. I passed Evie saucers. A gust of wind shook the inn, rattling the window-lined dining room. I was still getting used to the wind in winter, to the chill and the damp. Did you tell your parents, too? Evie walked around the table. Not them yet. Nate knows. I told Steven last night. He freaked out, but then he rallied. She jostled the table with her leg and reached forward to steady a pitcher. I stopped straightening the linen and looked at her, trying to peer past her veneer to see if she was actually upset. He freaked out? You know, whatever. How could you? Blah, blah, blah. Evie fluttered her hands in the air and rolled her eyes at the ceiling. A ray of sun shot through the window and danced across the table. I mean, we haven't exactly talked about what we're going to do. But the point is, he's not mad anymore, and he's coming to dinner tonight. That was him on the phone. Stephen Odin. I walked over to the other side of the table to a window overlooking the dock. At Thanksgiving, he'd taken Evie on the ferry to Ocracoke, got drunk, and left without her. It was his own way of ending their relationship. She called me from the terminal as the last boat was pulling out. They'd broken up a few weeks. They'd been broken up for a few weeks and then gotten back together. And then Evie realized she was pregnant. I turned and Evie was staring at me with round, dark eyes. Okay. I tried to sound cheery. Hey, I'll give him a chance. I smiled, and my face felt like it was cracking. Thank you.
Wow, Heather. I kind of wanted you to just keep reading.
Good. I've looked at that first bit like so many times. It's like I have no idea if it's good or terrible anymore. So I'm glad that you wanted to keep hearing it.
I love one of the things there's a lot that I love about your writing, but one of the things that I particularly love is the way that you can go from like sexy Sherpa and stigmata jokes to like lines like my dad would never see a Hatteras winter. That like even repeating that back makes me start to tear up. And
Yeah.
I love the way that you can swing back and forth between the two and it just feels so natural and lovely just as a very I don't want to use the word realistic because that feels sort of it doesn't give it enough credit, but it's a very natural and it has some verisimilitude of the
Right.
swinging back and forth between the two, at least
Yeah.
in the way I experience life, at least I guess.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I found that to be the case too. Like even though you're in this like really weird state of deep grief where you're like almost disconnected from yourself, like it's still like you're still yourself. It's still like living, I don't know, still like you like I don't know, cracking jokes and being like being funny and like then it hits you again. And I think it happens that way in life. And then I think in fiction, it makes hopefully, what I'm hoping for is that it makes the sad parts sadder almost, or more hit a little stronger, to have that, like, have it bouncing up against each other like that. That's what I hope anyway. And also, like, you don't just want to be like gloomy all the time, right? Like, like womp womp.
Yes.
People lose interest. I don't know. Like, it doesn't. You gotta have some way to like butt those two emotions up against each other and have them, like, I think, hopefully, like, highlight one another, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just judging from the section that you read with us now, I think the novel's gonna do that. And I can't I have it on um I have it on order, so I'll be able to read it. Um I'll be able to read it and make my way through, and I'm so excited. I was a little, I don't know. Um I was a little sad that this isn't going to be another Evie book because I love Evie, but
Oh,
I'm glad that I'm ready to get Charlotte's side of her
yeah.
adventures. So
Yeah,
I'm,
get
uh,
Charlotte's POV.
yeah, yeah, because I loved Baddest Girl on the Planet, so I'm
Yeah.
ready for Saddest Girl on the Beach for sure too.
Yeah. I'm super excited, and I've discovered relatively recently that I'm not done with them like I thought I was done with them, because these are companions. And so I'm, I'm working on something. I have an idea, and I'm very slowly writing it, that will should have have a little bit more, hopefully go for a trilogy. That's the
Awesome.
goal.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Is it from the lighthouse's perspective?
Maybe. I think it's from one of those houses that falls down into the ocean.
Oh, well,
Uh,
I can't wait. I can't wait for all I love your writing, so I can't wait to read all these. Um Speaking of writing that we love and connect with,
yes.
what is a book that has created the most mayhem in your life?
Okay, so I thought about this question, and that book is The Last Girls by Lee Smith. Because this book was a book I picked up probably like in a Walmart or something, like, to read on vacation, not knowing what I was getting into. And something about that book and about Lee Smith's voice, I had never read Lee Smith before, but I just really loved it. I loved the sort of like voiciness of the characters. I love that it was written literarily. Is that even a word? It was written with like a literary bent, but it was funny and accessible and like detail oriented and place driven. Um so like I loved all those things, and it was funny. Like, I loved that sort of mix. And so I started to read more of her stuff, and like um become a little bit fangirly. And I saw her speak at a AWP conference a long time ago, the one in Atlanta, like, I don't even know, a long time ago. She gave the keynote address, and like, she said something like, you can only write what you can write. And at the time I was still sort of scrambling with what I was going to write, but like, this idea that I could only write what I could write, like what's important to me, what like connects with me, just like set something off in my mind. And I was like, oh, okay. And I honestly think that's when I started writing this, what ended up being this book. So this book has been in progress for a long dang time. Um, so that was the start of the mayhem. And then, like, as I read more of her stuff, like, you always get asked during writing programs, like, who you emulate, or what's your favorite author, what tradition do you see yourself writing in. And I would always say, oh, I see myself writing in the tradition of Lee Smith, blah blah blah. That was always my go-to answer. And so then, as I was trying to get Baddest Girl published, I saw a call for submissions for the Lee Smith Novel Prize. And it was a North Carolina press, and it was Lee Smith, who was like my idol. And so I was like, well, I mean, if that doesn't fit, I don't know what does. So yeah, sure, I'm gonna send it. And that's what stuck. That's what that's what got it published. So that was absolutely the most mayhem caused by a book.
That is that's a big chain of, and it's a chain of events that just keeps going, right?
It just keeps going. It goes all the way back there to that like random book I picked out in Walmart because I wanted something to read.
Wow. Yeah, you never know, right? Like you never know what
Yeah.
you're gonna pick up.
Yeah, you
Um,
never know like, what it's gonna turn into, I guess.
Now I'm only familiar with Lee Smith's work in the context of that that I know that you had won the prize and so that I had looked her up.
Mhm.
Um, is she still alive?
She
Okay,
is. She
she's
is
still okay.
alive. She just was honored with a like Lee Smith Day in her hometown a couple years ago, and I got to go do that. That was really cool. Yeah, so she was born and raised in southwestern Virginia, so Appalachia still, but more sort of mountainy Appalachia. And yeah, her stuff is really voicey and really like, character driven and lots of Appalachian context. And then she's written a lot about Key West too and other places. And she's done like memoir and lots of fiction, novels and short stories. And so super prolific and, excellent literary citizen. So all around good stuff. And she's just really nice. So like
That's because that answers it, because I was going to ask if you've been able to meet with her and connect with her, and that sounds like you have.
couple times, yeah. And I was still like, this is crazy. This is bananas. Like got to meet Lee Smith. And I just got to talk to her a few times. Like she's super sweet, super supportive, volunteered to like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do an event with you or something. And I got to like go to her hometown and like meet her friends and have a potluck dinner with her. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, those are the kind of stories that like make you feel good about the literary world, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah, exactly. Still, it's like it is bananas. It's just like I don't know. Still don't think that part is real. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand. Yeah. Some of the good stuff and the bad stuff in the publishing world all feels sort of unreal. So,
yeah, a lot of it is really surreal. Like,
yeah. Hoping for more of the good than the struggles.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly.
which actually kind of brings me to my next question,
Mhm.
which is because we all go through our times, our harder times and rough patches with our writing or with our lives in general. Um, and I'm wondering what kind of advice would you, Heather, now give to a past version of Heather when she's maybe struggling, or maybe just you can look back and say, oh, not where you need to be going, Heather. Like, what kind of advice would you give?
Well, when I started promoting Baddest Girl, when that was coming out and I had to like start to do events and stuff, I sort of made a pact with myself um to just forget about the imposter syndrome and just pretend like I knew what I was doing and just like go for it and pretend that I was as deserving and as smart and as like willing and able to do these things as any like real authors. Um and so I was like, fuck it. I'm just gonna pretend that I know it. I'm just gonna pretend. Like I'm just gonna pretend that I am not an imposter. And so I did that. And after a while I kind of felt like I wasn't an imposter. And I wish I had done that about 20 years ago. Because I spent a lot of time feeling like I couldn't get what I wanted, which was to be a writer. Um, for whatever reason. Well, I mean, the odds are steep. They are. The odds are terrible, and it's not an easy life to want to do this. But I spent a lot of time just thinking like, well, I can't do that. Like I'm just like, the freeze from Ohio, and like, who am I to like think that I can do that, but I wish I had thought. I would tell myself a long time ago, I'm like, you can do that too, and you can don't count yourself out because you come from a small town in Ohio. Like, don't count yourself out. Don't like, if you want it, pretend like you know what you're doing and go get it. So that's what I would tell younger Heather. Like, just fake it. Like, because I just spent so much time thinking that other people were so much intrinsically better than I am, or like, well, I mean, they probably were more highly educated and like better connected, but like, I wish I just like faked it a little more and like believed in myself, you know.
I'm crying right now, and I don't have tissues. Oh, I do. They're right behind me. Yay! I hope that my mascara is the waterproof kind, right? Try to manage not to get that off. I know I feel ya. I feel you on that
Yeah,
answer a lot, right?
yeah.
And it also reminds me of I was reading like a memoir by the guy that played Big Bird, like was the original Big Bird, and he had played Big Bird for a long time.
Uh-huh.
And there was some scene where Big Bird was supposed to dance,
Uh-huh.
and he was like, I don't know how to dance, you guys. And they were like, well, Big Bird knows how to dance, so dance, right? And I feel that same thing when thinking about imposter syndrome. I
Yeah.
try to like, you know, like JSK the writer knows how to do interviews or
How
whatever,
to do interviews.
right?
So
Like
then
Big Bird can dance.
yeah. Exactly. Then you just figure it out because that's all anyone else is doing too. And like, that was the thing that like, like, that's what kind of I mean, it still doesn't click all the way. I still have to fight against it, but like, I don't know, like, there's no reason why I can't get in there. Like, there's no reason why we can't do interviews and pretend to dance. Like, we can do it too.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad that in talking about imposter syndrome, you mentioned that uh I'm trying to get my thoughts together on this, that sometimes it is true that other people have more education or have had more opportunities. I think
Right.
so often when people talk about imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
they're like, you're just as good and you have, just get in there. And they
Yes.
don't acknowledge like the reality of like,
Right.
yeah, you can get in there, but you also need to understand this is what you're getting in.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like,
I understand this is what you're getting into. This is what you're gonna have to grapple with. Because yeah, like coming from rural Ohio, like we had um I didn't have classes like that in high school and junior high, and I had a wonderful small college with wonderful professors, but I had there were two creative writing classes offered. Like, that was it. That was what was offered. That's what I took, but like, I didn't have a minor, like a major in creative writing, and a like connections with all of that. So yeah, like, that's the reality too, is that yeah, it's not an equal playing field, and if you don't just like jump in there, like, you do have to have some idea of what you're jumping into.
yep, yep. And but and I'm trying to I don't want to say it works out in the end. So I just this weekend watched, there's a movie called Relax, I'm from the Future,
Oh,
and it's hilarious. I highly recommend it. And one of the things he keeps saying is like, it all works out. Just know
yeah.
it all works out. It all works out. And like, wouldn't it be nice if like somebody could like when we're having those imposter syndrome moment, like it all works out. Like
Works out.
it'll work
Someone tell you that. Yeah. Like, okay.
out. Okay, I can do this then. I know it's gonna work out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What do you think that Heather would say to you now? What advice do you think that past Heather would have to send forward to you?
Oh man. Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think that past Heather was a little more you know what? She was for better or worse, less like both worn down by the world and how it functions and like less immune to being a highly sensitive artistic person in a world that doesn't necessarily value and understand that. So that Heather was way more raw, um, and sensitive and emotional and didn't necessarily know how to deal with that the way that I've kind of figured it out now to figure out how as the person that I am you have to um which is an introverted shy, anxiety riddled person who notices detail, a writer,
Right,
um
yeah.
right, like how uh, you kind of learn or have to learn how to protect yourself and how to function in the world full of people who are not like that, um and who don't have that high degree of sensitivity. But the past me had that, and I kind of miss that, and I miss the sort of heightened sensitivity to everything around me, and I think she would say try not to lose that. Try to hang on to that even as you're, like, navigating this, world that is not an intuitive, artistic, sensitive place, because it's not, it's the opposite of that, and, like, she was so, like, I don't know, past me was so it was just so much, like, that world was so much, and it has the effect of kinda wearing you down, but also, like, building up this layer of, like, immunity to it, and it's like so I feel like I've lost a lot of that in myself as I've become an adult, and I think that would be the advice that early me would say to try to hang on to both the good parts and the bad parts, because like, I was, you know, overcome with beauty and how, like, wonderful and beautiful parts of life are in the world, and then also, like, really, just blown away by tragedy and the terrible parts, because a lot of life is terrible too, and, I just sort of I think she would want me to not lose that, and it's hard to not lose that as you live in this world, you know?
Yeah. How Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question that there might not be an answer to.
Okay.
So, I know that full well going into the question. How do you do that? How do you keep the sensitive part
Yeah.
that, like, marvels at the sunrise over the sound, but doesn't crumble when I don't know, the turtles can't find their way out to sea or
Yeah.
something when during mating season. I don't
Yeah.
know. I cry when I read the things about, like, turning your porch light. I don't know if it's like that up there, but, like, down in Florida, there's a lot of, you have to turn off the porch lights between April and October because otherwise the turtles will
Yeah.
go towards that instead of out towards the moon, right? Like, and I just it gets me.
Yeah. There were recently these, did you see the ones that were cold stunned on Hatteras? Like they were, it was just a couple weeks, just last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. But there were all these sea turtles that washed up and they were just like stunned by the cold because of that cold snap. And I was like, oh my God. And they rescued as many as they could and took them up to the thing. But yeah, I don't know. But even that stuff that like it doesn't like it still gets me, but I kind of roll past it more than I would have
Yeah.
past me, and I kind of like feel like that's a well, that's a negative thing, you know? I don't I'd rather still be a little bit more crushed, you know? I feel like the some of the world has crushed that in me um, as I've had to navigate things. So I don't know. I don't know how you get it. And like I lived on the Outer Banks for a year, right after I got married. And like when we moved down there, like my one goal, like when we moved down, I was like, this is so magical. It's so wonderful. It's so beautiful. I'm not going to lose sight of the like beauty of this place. And within a few weeks, like it's like the place where you live. It's like this is sort of like you become a little bit immune to it. And it just becomes like, oh, do this and we gotta go to the post office and now I have to drive up the road again to get to the Food Lion. And I sort of lost it and I didn't find it again until and this comes into the book. I bring this into like the middle part of the book where Charlotte's family comes down. Um and you see it again from like the outsider's perspective. So like you're like, oh right, this is beautiful and like look at that. Look at that. Like it's wild. Um so just like trying to somehow hang on to that perspective, but I don't really know how you do it. I don't know. I don't know how you do it.
I yeah, I think I'm still erring on the side of being crushed by a lot of stuff. So I was looking for some tips, but if you figure it out, let me know because I'm
I'll
still,
let you know.
you know, um, I was crying when you were, talking about imposter syndrome and crying. I would
So
cry at the
quiet,
drop of
like all my kids' performances, anything that had to do with preschool, I was like, everyone else is just sitting there watching their kids like walk across the tiny little stage and leave their preschool days behind and go to kindergarten, leaving behind their baby days. And I am like sobbing, sucked down my face, like snot, like everybody else is like, you know? Maybe they're crying internally, but I'm still like, I'm still kind of a mess.
Yeah, you understand the momentousness, the moment.
Yes, like yeah,
Yeah,
think about it. Like this is like
monumental as they
monumental.
grow.
They'll never be this small ever again.
Oh, I don't even have kids, and you're gonna make me cry about all the time passing and all that.
Yeah, yeah, I think about that a lot. Probably too much. Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned, speaking of time, um,
Yeah.
you had so one, I know we should be nearing the end of the interview, but I have another question because
Yeah.
uh you mentioned that you had been working on the book, the sort of the two books, the companion novels for a long time.
Mhm.
Do you remember how long ago was it that you first started working on
Mhm.
these with Evie and Charlotte?
Yeah, so Evie and Charlotte were they were created like in my undergrad, like one of those like one of my two creative writing classes. We had this assignment to write about setting. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna write about these two girls that meet on the sand dune at the beach, because that's where I love. That's the place that I love the most. Um, and so I did just like a little scene, and then I wrote like a really terrible short story, like really purple prose, and like, you know, it's one of my first short stories that was set there with and Evie and Charlotte were kind of in this story. Um, and then it was at Ohio University in first grad school where we met, that I and it wasn't my first creative writing workshop because I was like my much like Charlotte, my dad had just passed away and I like immediately went to grad school and found that a very difficult transition to make. So I didn't start writing it right away, but I did, I think in maybe my second workshop, I started what turned out to be The Saddest Girl on the Beach. I started the novel. Um, and I drafted it over the course of those years there. I finished a draft. And then I put that thing away. Like I put it really far away. And I just couldn't revise it because I knew it needed a lot of revision. I think I workshopped it my first workshop in West Virginia for my MFA. I did like the second half of it and it needed a lot of work. I knew it needed a lot of work. I had revised the first part extensively and it was seemed okay. But then the middle was real bad. The ending was pretty bad. But I just couldn't work on it. Like I couldn't go back to that space. Um, grappling with like the death of a parent. And I just couldn't do it. So I put it away and I didn't do it. And I started writing Evie's stories then, which I thought I was just going to write a quick short story about Evie and how she got divorced. I discovered her voice in that process. And then that turned into a whole project. And that one was me sort of rebounding from writing this book that's coming that's out now. It was me just I was just like playing around, having fun, enjoying like the different problems of Evie's life and enjoying her very, very different voice from Charlotte's. Because she's fun. Like she's like oh, what's that word called? Alter ego. Like
Uh,
Evie like does and says what she wants. In ways
Evie is mayhem. That is
is mayhem. She will stoke that. Like she like gets a charge out of that. And it was just fun. And like I wrote that and I revised it and like I had that one ready to go. And like I really genuinely didn't know if this book was just like me spinning my wheels to get to Evie. Um I was afraid that it was a little bit. So, but in 20 when was it? 2022? Must have been 2022. Um when school opened again and the big kids went off to school and I put the little kid in preschool for like 3 mornings a week. I was like, well, I'm gonna revise this book. So I finally felt like I could do it. I finally felt like I could, and I had gone back to it intermittently throughout the years. Like I had gone back to it trying to revise it. And I would get into it and just be like, I can't do it. No. But something clicked. And like I guess enough time had passed that I just opened it. And even so, it was like a lot of, I don't know if it's inertia, a lot of like, it wasn't inertia, a lot of like, I had to really talk myself into going back into that world of the recent loss. Um, but I think I gotten enough distance finally to look at the book um as a book, like with a mindset of editing and with the mindset of okay, what am I gonna do to fix this scene? Or like what logically, what can I do? So maybe that's like that grown-up part of me that like the sensitive part of me wrote it and then the the other side edited it and revised it. So I could finally look at it and think to myself, like, okay, like why is this what like why did the tension vanish in this half of the book? The tension is gone. What did I do? What can I do to bring it back? And then like ratchet the tension up instead of going the other way. And things like that. And just think about what can I do to get this where it needs to be. You know, as a book and not like how am I writing through the loss of my father. Um, so I did that and like it was still a lot. Like I remember like the first day I dropped him off, it was raining and I probably not the first day. The first day I would have been a mess because I just dropped off my youngest at preschool. But sometime in that first week. Like got him into school and like it was raining and I was like, okay. I sat in the car in the church parking lot where the preschool was and I just opened my computer and I'm like, okay, all I have to do, all I have to do is read it and type it to myself. All I have to do is read it. And so started reading it. I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. And like I just kept moving forwards and I just kept like opening the computer and reading it and fixing it as I went along. Um, which was great. And at first I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be pretty easy. I'm going to have this done in a few weeks. Because the beginning was okay. Like I'd taken care of that beginning. And then I got to the middle, I like, oh yeah, this is gonna take some rewriting. It took the school year. It took the school year to rewrite the rest of it, but I just kind of once I got started and into it, I was able to look at it through a different lens and get it to where it needed to be. It took a lot of time. But it was like those little chunks of time. I was just like tried really hard to just like shift gears immediately and like don't do anything else but this and then like go pick him up. Think about preschool stuff for the rest of the day.
Wow. I am so glad that you kept at it and didn't leave Charlotte, well, I would say in a drawer, but I guess it's more
Yeah.
in a computer file untouched. So
Wow.
I'm glad that you got her back out, because just
Yeah.
judging from that opening chapter, I'm looking forward to delving in and getting to know her story. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming in today, Heather.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to talk with you.
Wow. What a fun interview that was. I have been a fan of Heather's work for over a decade now, and I'm so excited to get to read her second novel, Saddest Girl on the Beach. I loved Baddest Girl on the Planet, and so I'm excited to delve into its companion novel. And it's not a sequel, it's a companion novel, so you should be able to read it without having read Baddest Girl on the Planet first. But you're gonna want to read that one too, I think. I would think. I um Personal opinion, might have a little bit of a bias there, but I'm very excited. Very excited. And I think I'm gonna go check out a little Lee Smith as well, right? Uh Her work sounds up my alley. Sounds like it might be good to add to my ever-growing TBR pile. Thanks for stopping by.